Hello.
Hi, Ramona. I'm Alicia. I'm helping with the admin stuff.
All right. Nice to meet you, Alicia.
You too. I'll let's all cross our fingers that the breakout thing works. I think it's going to be way easier on Zoom, but it's on me to just like get everybody in the right place. So,
Yeah, I did it Monday with about 20 artists, and it went pretty well.
Okay, awesome.
We
Yeah,
used
it's
that
just
document and everything. And one of the artists said that they really appreciate it as one of the most organized Zoom meetings they've been in. So hopefully
okay. Love it.
we can replicate it.
Yeah, I think that the Google Slides that you sent with the sticky notes, I think that'll be really helpful too. So just get ourselves organized.
Yes.
Love it.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, how are you all doing?
Well,
Considering.
well. doing well. Lacey, I didn't recognize you. With your hair has grown just like mine, and the glasses, yes.
Yes, I look very studious with my glasses. Well, I'm at the age now where I need my readers, so. If it happens to the best of us.
Always. Mine are right here, but I can't see if I put them on. I can't see.
Okay, so I'm gonna put y'all on hold until we have a couple more folks that we're expecting, so.
Okay.
We're gonna be flexible. We are gonna get started in about 1 minute. We're still waiting for a couple of our speakers to join. Can you all hear me okay? I just wanna make sure. All right, good, thank you. All right, let's go ahead and get started. I was trying to make sure all the speakers were on. Vincent, I see you are on, good. So it looks like we have a great group who's joined us today. So first of all, I'd just like to say thank you all for taking the time. I know that this is, we're in crazy times right now, just thinking about everything that's going on with obviously COVID-19, but then also thinking about the racial and social injustices that we're seeing locally, nationally, globally. It's just a very difficult time. So I know that that makes it difficult for everybody to be able to congregate like this, but I just want to say thanks for showing up. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Ashley Parrott. I'm Director of Policy for the Mayor's Office. I'm also the Social Infrastructure and Impact Focus Group Co-Chair for Build Back Better Together. And so later today, you'll hear from my other co-chair, Vincent James, who will share a little bit more about Build Back Better Together as well. But I just want to give you a quick high-level overview of what we plan to cover today. So if we could just pull up the agenda, Alicia, that'd be great. There we go. All right. Okay. So today, as I mentioned, we're going to hear from Vincent James about what this Build Back Better Together is. There are many of you who may have been a part of initial conversations, but I think most of you have not. And so, you know, this is our chance to be able to give you a high-level overview of what this is all about, what we're thinking, but then also to get your feedback on what you think needs to happen in order for it to have an actual impact in this community. And then also, you know, we know that nonprofits and philanthropy have worked tirelessly, particularly over the last couple of months, but they, you know, something they always have been doing in order to support the community and save lives. And so we see this as an opportunity for us to collectively uplift the sector, which is absolutely critical. And so this is about bringing everybody together to do that. And so that's why we're partnering closely with the Center for Nonprofit Excellence. And we'll hear an update from Ann Coffey, who is their CEO, to tell us about a community effort that we're working closely with her and many in the community on. And then, you know, the big part of this meeting, and I want to spend the bulk of our time together focusing on getting feedback from you all. We know that we cannot do this work alone, and we can't lead this work alone. We need to work with you all hand in hand in supporting the sector. So that's why we want about 30 minutes of time to the key questions, to delve into the key questions that we have listed here in the agenda. So with that, I know many of you have joined this group by, I'm sorry.
And yes, she has always done.
If everybody could put their phones on mute, that would be great. And then we'll definitely open up when we have time for a group discussion. But one of the things I wanted to note is that many of you probably signed up through the online website. And so that's how we got many of your names for this meeting. I want to make sure that this group is as inclusive and has as many representatives across community as possible. So please be sure to share out this information to anybody that you think.
No, it was not. Did I couch it enough or no?
Nonprofit sector, or any folks in community who have interest in this group. So continue to push it out, the more the merrier. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to kick it over to you, Vincent, to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about this work.
All right, thank you, Ashley. Again, for those of you who haven't had an opportunity to meet, my name is Vincent James. I'm the Chief of Community Building, and I welcome you to this team. We're excited about the opportunity that we have when we talk about Build Back Better Together, dismantling systemic racism and creating a dynamic economic growth. And to really think about what we're doing and the opportunity we have. You know, this has really never occurred in our history, you know, of our country, where we have the confluence of 3 pandemics. We have the COVID-19 pandemic. We also have an economic pandemic as well as a protest pandemic for social justice. And so navigating through all of that and seeing these challenges, it also creates opportunity for us. And so that's what we're really looking at when we talk about Building Back Better Together. It's an initiative to really to tackle the needs of the day and really plan for how do we have a better future. And so in doing so, we're being able to take and examine all of the recent planning efforts to prioritize them from existing plans, and also identifying gaps within the existing plans, and really by turning this into really creative and innovative ideas and projects and solutions, really the challenge what we were presented today with this confluence of 3 pandemics. And Building Back Better Together is really a strong call for our community to come together, because we cannot do this without you. We can't do it without the community. Government has the convening power, but it's the will of the people that will determine the future of our city. And so we are strongly dependent upon you, and that's why I'm excited you're joining us today. And so we anticipate that, you know, Build Back Better Together is going to be resulting in some meaningful action that our community will be able to be committed to and really be able to take on. And so when we think about some of the existing efforts and supplementing the gaps that we have within those efforts, one of the things, a couple of things that we're looking to do and move forward, really to accelerate and reprioritize our current plans to make sure that they are in alignment with what our current goals are. Identify those gaps from current plans, and then in light of the current conditions, then through an equity lens, how do we look at that as a community, and how do we address these challenges? And also develop a policy agenda that really furthers the equity initiatives that the city has begun, and what we know we need to continue to travel down this pathway if we're going to create a community, what I refer to as the beloved community, where all people can reach their full human potential. And then leverage our partnerships that we have with the foundations, actions, projects, policies, all the things that we have that will advance an equitable recovery in our community. And so when we think about the process in terms of how all of this is going to come about, the process is comprised of a steering committee and 7 focus area teams, of which you are a part of one of the focus area teams to really guide this work. And the focus area teams are really the primary point of what we've identified as our public engagement. And so when we think about most of the participants in these focus areas, you all are experts in terms of this area and what we're working in and focusing. So our commitment, to equity extends way beyond what we've seen in the past and where we're trying to go into the future. And so some of the areas in terms of the focus areas are arts and culture, education and talent. We also have urbanism, hospitality and sports. We have social infrastructure, which we are part of, and the impact, built environment and natural environment, and the steering committee. And so all of this together is really helping us to be able to move our city forward, to come out of the pandemic, to come through the protests, and to come through this economic challenges that we see in our country, to come through in the best way possible. I think Louisville has a unique opportunity, unlike many other cities, that we have an opportunity to get this right. One of the things we've seen and why we're seeing so many protests in our community because of the injustice that people have felt for years. There's a Kerner Commission that was instituted in 1969, 68, 67, that we did not get it right then. There are some things that we can pull from that, as well as what we're seeing today and the activities that we have going forward, that we have an opportunity to be able to get it right. And the reason I think that Louisville is uniquely positioned, because we're not so large that it's just an impossible task to try to pull all this together. We have a close-knit community, what the mayor refers to, that we've been practicing things for a long time. So we've built the social muscles around to be able to help us to sustain and to have a very resilient community. The other piece is that we're not so small that it would not make a significant impact. We're just the right size as a mid-sized city and has been identified as one of the breakthrough cities. So I truly believe that as we build back better together, if we get this right, we will truly be that breakthrough city in the Midwest. And so I'm excited to serve with you. I wanted to give you that overview in terms of Build Back Better Together and what that's going to encompass. And so I'll now turn it back over to Ashley.
Thank you for that update, Vincent. And also, as you can see in the side panel, this is the 2-page document you all should have received in advance of the meeting. This is a work in progress. And so as we continue to get feedback from you all, you can continue to scroll through that. As we continue to get feedback from you all, this may change. And I know that there may be specific changes for the social impact group. That's what we're expecting anyway, based on conversations, but it should be a helpful guide. I'd now like to turn it over to Ann Coffey, CEO of the Center for Nonprofit Excellence. We've been working closely with Ann and others in the community to ensure that we're not doing this blindly. We believe that in order to have some type of impact, in order to truly provide the support that's needed, we have to work hand in hand with sector leaders as well as with the community. And that's something that Ann will talk a little bit more about. And we'll be working with her to ensure that there's alignment between the Build Back Better Together work, the work that CMP and others in the community will be doing. So Ann Coffey, I'm turning it over to you.
So hello, can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Can hear you now.
Okay, great, thank you. So I wanted to say hello. I see a lot of familiar faces that I haven't seen in a while, so that's always fun in these times. So I know most of you on the call know who CNPE is, the Center for Nonprofit Excellence. Little brief commercial. We're a member organization, and our mission is to help other nonprofits elevate their work through training and education and advocacy, convening, consulting. And we always have some type of comprehensive schedule of webinars. So if you're not familiar with us, I encourage you to check us out. We also have a tremendous list of resources that provide guidance and information on the COVID-19 pandemic and the current fight for justice for Black lives. So please join us if you're not a member. You know, we think of our community as a three-legged stool. You've got the private sector, the public sector, and the nonprofit sector. And it's important that all three of those sectors be strong and steady in order for us to be able to do the work that we know that we need to do. So CMPE is delighted to be connected to this work from the public sector, the Build Back Better Together, which is exactly what we need to be doing, building back and doing it together. And sometimes doing it together is more difficult to do than it is to talk about. So one of the initiatives that CMPE set out to do shortly after we were hit with COVID and did our first pivot, we started out on our second pivot and said, okay, now what are we really going to do to be able to serve this sector? And we have, we're launching what we're calling the Community Activation Network. It's CAN for short. And the idea here is we talk a lot about thinking and working differently, but how do we really do that? How do we really come together as a community and share information, share ideas, work on important work that we need to accomplish together to make the kind of impact that we know we want to make? So CAN is premised on the belief that the collective is more powerful and able to accomplish more for our community than any of us working alone. And I think we all sort of buy into that theory, but doing it's a whole different thing. So we are going to what I'm calling still an experiment with a different approach that is centered around creating connections and strengthening relationships throughout our community. So having a place, a space, and a platform where we can invite the voices of our sector in to work together and to build relationships together to get this work done. So ultimately, that's what this is about. We are just getting ready to have our first, what I'm calling organizing meeting with a small group of people. And that's really for my benefit because it is an experiment and we're going to come together and put a framework and form to this. But over time, our goal is to ultimately this time next year, I keep saying this, so hopefully it will happen, that we have 200 or 300 people in this network where information is flowing, ideas are flowing, we're building connections in parts of this community that we've never been able to connect to before, and get some important work done. So I'm going to stop there. It's just beginning. Happy to offline talk to any of you that are more interested in it. And of course, we'll keep you updated and hopefully soon invite you to come around that table. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, Anne. And I just wanted to provide a little context about what that alignment could look like. And Anne, you can correct me, but we will continue to convene this group on a regular basis. And when I say we, Vincent and I from the city side. And so our goal is to be able to continue to provide information to this group on the CAN work as it continues to be built out, but then also share broadly with you what's going on across other focus groups in the Build Back Better Together network. At the same time, we want you all to continue to provide feedback to us, help us lead this work, and we can report that back out to groups as well. So we want to make sure there's a strong feedback loop between all the critical work that's going on in the community around this. So we're going to continue the convening. My hope is that as CAN continues to be built out across community more broadly, that this group will fall into that broader network over time. And so I think that's what Anne, you were saying. But in the meantime, we'll continue to do this regular convening with this group and continue to build on this existing group. So does that sound right, Anne? Okay. All right. Okay. So if there's any other questions about alignment, we are, the reason I'm saying that we're tight on time is because I really want us to dive deep into the breakouts with these key questions. I think that's very, very important. So I'm going to move us into that direction. So we're going to have breakout sessions. I believe there's going to be 4 different groups. Each group will have a facilitator leading us through key questions that are included in the agenda. Number 1, what is your greatest desire for the philanthropic nonprofit sector in Louisville? What action steps or goals are necessary to take in the midterm within 6 months? What action steps and goals are necessary to take in the long term? That's 2021 and beyond. What's already working that needs doubling down on? And what would you do tomorrow to support the sector if money were no object? So you will have somebody in each of your groups facilitating those conversations. And we also sent out a Google Doc to capture any of the feedback you all are providing at that time. I know sometimes in these settings, it's hard to get a word in. And so it looks like Ramona shared that with the group. So make sure that you click on that. And actually, I'm going to turn it over to Ramona to talk a little bit about how that can be used in these sessions. Ramona, can you speak to this?
Yes, I can. Thank you, Ashley. It's the school teacher in me. I'm a former elementary school teacher. I want to give everyone an opportunity to have voice. So I created this document that I'm going to attempt to share with you now. And each group, this is for some brainstorming. Since we're going to be in rooms, each room has a slide where they can capture their information. I hope you all can see this screen. So all you do is you simply click on one of the sticky notes, you type your ideas there, and that's each presenter will share their screen so we can see people adding to it as we're discussing in the room. And there is a slide, a sheet for each question, and they're color coded. So you'll be able to flow through them as we're going through this meeting. And since I think we only have about 30 minutes, we probably have about 5 minutes for each slide, for each question to discuss. So it may be helpful to start the question by giving people some time to type in their thoughts. And then once you see what's there, you can kind of discuss some of the things that you see on that sheet, on that form. I think that's pretty much all that I have regarding this. I'm going to stop and.
Okay, sounds like you may have cut out for a second.
Do you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Are there any questions that people may have about this?
This is one tool. I will say this is one tool that can be used in each group. If some of you may be overwhelmed by this, I suggest you take whatever approach works best for you all. So, all right, Ramona, thank you for sharing that with us. I also want to note that we'll have just a brief report out at the very end, but the bulk of time should be spent in these groups, having discussions about these key questions. Identify who will be doing the report out so we can be prepared to have, it seems like you all have control over your mics, but we can prepare to have those mics open for you if there's an issue. Otherwise, let's go ahead and move into our breakouts. Thank you all.
I kind of saw that he,
Right.
or we just picked. And then who wants to deliver everything at the end? Who wants to be our debrief? Anybody? Deb?
If no one else jumps in, sure.
Okay. All right. So first question for the group, and we all can see names on our screen. So first question is for a breakout session. What is your greatest desire for the philanthropy nonprofit sector in Louisville? And so I think we can jump in and go, or if you guys want to kind of raise hands and talk.
My first one is, as someone who's only lived in the city for 5.5, coming on 6 years, I'd like to see them play better together. The especially in the arts nonprofit sector, I know that there's a lot of turf kind of thing, and there's not a lot of rising tide lifts all boats thoughts.
So play better together. And I think there's a couple people there that probably, I'd like to second that too, Bennett, play better together in the nonprofit sector. And then I think to add to that, I'd probably like to say from the nonprofit is there's so much overlapping work. I wish that our nonprofit partners would do better in being efficient and using resources, that probably we could identify bigger gaps, and then the things that are not being addressed in those gaps is when we can step in and see what services. But I do think that some nonprofit sectors tend to overlap in business targets. So I'd like to see more efficiency and maybe community partnership. I think that would be helpful too. All right, so
Keisha,
who else?
it's Neville here. I'd add to that. I'd even use the word merger. It needs to happen. I was doing a capacity interview for Ashley Roundtree, one of our clients, and you know, it'd just be a heck of a lot easier if this nonprofit would just merge with another one. They'll raise the money quicker. Their mission will advance. They got to build capacity. So merger, and we should use that word and embrace that word. It is important and beneficial.
I agree.
Who else?
There's a lot of overlap.
Oh, go ahead, Nicholas.
I agree. There's a lot of overlap. Organizations that kind of fall on the same Venn diagram that could probably not duplicate efforts and use resources better.
Okay, Teresa?
Yeah, I was just gonna, I will say take it up a level, and I would love to see our nonprofit and philanthropic community fully embrace the Greater Louisville projects for deep drivers for our community, because I think they are pretty comprehensive. And yet if we were able to say, if this is the way that we provide a vibrant community, both from quality of place, health, education, economic vitality, and competitiveness as a city, then how do we start to really move the needle collectively against those deep drivers? And I just don't think they're fully embraced, and I don't think we have a shared language, because that will then help in aligning us behind the shared work that has to be done and where there might be gaps or duplication, and ability to really start to streamline and work more collaboratively.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think that's really sharp. And I think our city has a lot of really great data. I mean, oh my gosh, if there's one thing we have an outpouring of data. We have, you know, Greater Louisville Project, we have the Health Equity Report, we have Louisville Urban League's annual report. We have so much amazing data. And I think the unification of that data and how to use it collectively. And I think that goes back to the philanthropic side too, Teresa. I'd really like philanthropy organizations to think about how we can start to package better opportunities of funding. So going after capital in a way that we could do better. So instead of presenting our city more so, as to Teresa's point, as a more unified approach and going after national funding versus always going after more local funding. And I think that would be more helpful to entice national funders to put money into our city.
That's actually exactly one of the other sort of big bugaboos on my list, is that we in Louisville tend to look inwardly much more than we do outwardly. Mm-hmm. And we think I always say that Louisville has an inferiority complex. We actually need to start presenting ourselves and what we have to offer to the rest of the country and the rest of the world, because as we probably all know, we all have friends other places, they still think, oh, Kentucky, you're all Cletus the slack-jawed yokel. They have no, I have friends that come to visit me, and they're just blown away by all the amazing stuff that's going on here. And we're so afraid of growth. We're so afraid of becoming the next Austin, which nobody wants to grow at that rate, that we are insular and turn down opportunity for any kind of reasonable growth, to the point where our rate of growth is, I don't know, it's like 2% a year or less than that. And that is something that we're never going to be the world-class medium-sized city that we want to be if we don't talk ourselves up externally.
Right. So I'm going to ask one last time, any questions, any more answers on question A? Because if not, I'm going to move on to question B. Any more? All right, I think we did great on question A. Okay, so question B, what action steps or goals are necessary to take in the midterm? So this is within the first 6 months. Any takers? So again, what action steps or goals are necessary to take in the midterm within 6 months?
I think we need to take a stock of our philanthropic assets so that we have them all in one place and, siloed by healthcare, arts, social justice, whatever it is, so that we have, and I mean, I'm sure the center has a lot of this data. But I also feel like, again, going back to the other one, that it should be externalized, that so that we can show to potential funders or other giant grant making organizations or mentors or whatever, what we really have going on here. And then that way we can also identify maybe some holes that we have.
I think it's a really good suggestion. I think Teresa has a great tool at Metro United Way. I think the United Communities and understanding, again, the gaps that we need to identify in the nonprofit sectors are really important. And I think overlapping work in sectors need to be, to Neville's point, merged. I don't know that that can happen in 6 months, but I think there's an opportunity for us to start collectively looking at or probably weeding through data collection that we know in the social service sector. And again, I think that helps us be able to touch all points and then present a better picture of we are handling everything and everybody has an opportunity to address the gaps versus there's 900 people addressing housing and one person addressing how you keep a house going, like sustainability or to fix the roof on the house. So if you have 900 people in housing and one person fixing it, how is that sustainable? Right. So
yeah. And I'm going to jump off now, but I will say, Keisha and Tamar, to both of those points, I think also one of the things that we need to do, aside from looking at the needs, because so many more have emerged post-COVID, but also quantifying what it's going to take to solve and meet those needs, because we don't have a good sense of, I'll take the early childhood space and childcare. What is it going to cost us to make sure that every child has a safe place to go? Those numbers have shifted drastically because of all the regulations and requirements, and yet they are a barrier to workforce. They are a barrier to so many other things. And so how do we start to, in each of the areas that we're operating, quantify what is it going to take? Because we might actually need every foundation or funding partner to invest in it, because we're not going to get there with the 10 that are doing it right now, because the size of the need and the cost is so great. So we have to quantify that, I think, and that work can start and has been going on, but can really solidify over the next several months.
Right. I think that's a great point, Teresa. See ya.
I'll jump in real quick with a comment, and I'm sorry I was on mute, but for the first question, trying to get more community involved in nonprofit sector in general is probably something that we need to be really focused on at the moment. So as far as like next steps for me on that, and this data may exist, but I'm not aware of it, and I'm in the park sector, and I don't think it exists locally for us in the park sector. So I'm going to agree we need better coordination on the park side. I'm going to add that to arts as well. But just doing an inventory of where we are demographically and with community engagement on not just we need it for the philanthropic organizations, we also need it for the nonprofit sectors. What is our diversity in terms of, wide range of diversity in terms of leadership positions and staff as well. So I think in our park sector, that's a weakness in the environmental realm in general. And so I'm going to assume that carries over in a lot of different ones. And that's really a root cause issue we've just got to start dealing with.
And I love that. And so I'm going to add to that. I think that, and I know that Anna is working diligently on this, so not to throw her on the spot, but I think that in the next 6 months, we really need to take an assessment of how many immigrants, brown and Black, Hispanic, minority, serve on the decision-making power and boards in this community. And if we want to continue to talk about racial equity and accountability, I think that is how we continue to bring equity into this city. We cannot have the powers that be continue to lead the sectors in which we serve any longer. I think that there's an accountability and has to, and each board, as we all know, and oversees a large board, has bylaws. And so we can't expect every board to change a bylaw. But we can expect the opportunity of accountability to say, even if my bylaw doesn't state it, I'm going to make sure that this board is going to have a portion of minority, or a portion of women-owned businesses, or a portion of immigrant community, or Because as a social service sector, how can we really serve all communities if all communities are not representatives of the decision making in our organizations? And so I think that that's a good part to maybe add as well. Alicia, yes.
Oh no, I was just clapping to what you were saying. Please.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. So anything add to 6 months? We have 3 more to go.
I'll jump in on the 6 months real quick.
Oh, yes, please.
Yeah, it seems to me, we are seeing obviously really high unemployment rates and people who have kind of been, sidelined with the current economic situation. So there's a lot of talent that is just kind of sitting there sidelined right now that I think could be utilized and leveraged by the nonprofit sector, especially if industry is, tanking, bars, restaurants, hospitality is not open. There's a lot of people who just aren't in work that have resources that aren't being utilized. It's just a waste of talent. And if we can match that up in the short term with needs of the nonprofit sector, I see a potential that organizations are sitting on endowments or philanthropic money that they're not spending that could be used to hire people short-term, consultants, temp projects, even getting people volunteer, keep their resumes fresh while they're out of work. We could really align that unemployed temporarily group with needs of the nonprofit sector.
Great. So the third question, we're gonna.
Can I jump in just really quick?
Oh, sure, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Just when you were talking about diversity and equity, I think it's also important for us to include disabled communities in that as well.
I think that's awesome. Yes. And Stephen, another one that Ann and I have spoken about before. I have a very close friend who runs a organization called Ideas X Lab. So I think LGBTQ+ always also has to be in the forefront of our minds and think about, because they also, from an advocacy perspective, deal with a lot of discrimination and conversations about progression. So I think that they as well need to be at the table, just like any other group that's challenged with that. And so LGBTQ+ should probably add it to that as well. But I love the addition of accessibility.
Yeah, I'd like to add just a little asterisk to that too, in that historically, the people who get to show up at the table concerning disabled citizens are typically organizations. So for instance, I work for an organization. I'm not a disabled person. And yet, oftentimes it's the people who run the organizations and not disabled people themselves who have a seat at the table. So just something to be aware of and pay attention to.
That's a really good point. So back to, and I don't remember who said that, but just more community involvement, like boots on the ground, grassroots, people we are representing in that discussion at the table as well to talk about how we guide that discussion. Okay.
If I could add one more point, going back to the whole merger thing, sort of not letting perfect get in the way of good enough. And that there's a lot of talk in the nonprofit sector about, aligning services and aligning interests, and this particular home care service can only go with this particular home care agency if there could be a merger. But I don't think we should think in those terms. If we're really trying to consolidate, it can just become a program of a larger infrastructure. And so I think mixing it up would be a good and healthy thing in a thoughtful way.
It's good. So next one is, and this is the one that's probably going to take a long time. So I want to just make sure for the sake of time we're at 2:05. So let's make sure for discussion, if you have a discussion topic that's similar, just kind of echo it and let's have everyone have an ability to talk on this one. So what action steps or goals are necessary to take in the long term, 2021 and beyond?
And also, let's not forget, we have these note cards that if you don't want to say it, and you can just jot quick notes while we're all talking.
Yes, we have the note cards. And I know Bennett is also taking notes that we could just add to the note cards later so we could scribe as well, because I just knew we were all going to chat. So what action steps or goals are necessary to take in the long term, 2021 and beyond? I think Ann Coffee should fix all of the world's problems. The end.
I wish I could. Unfortunately, that's not gonna. Then you all would be bored silly. So
yeah, well, that's true.
That's true. I'll let Dave Rock do that.
So, all right, that's a hard one, but easy and hard because we kind of all know what the future holds for success, but it's how do you get there in such a hard situation? But let's just wave our wands and sprinkle unicorn glitter.
I'm gonna say it's gonna take us a while to get this diversity data, and so we would be remiss if we didn't actually analyze that and come up with some action steps on how we're gonna move the needle on those issues. So
I think that's
I
important.
mean, that's kind of basic.
Yeah. So, and you know, I've been throwing this idea around for a long time. I know Ann has heard me talk about it multiple times, but what if we just chose to do philanthropy in our city in a different way? What if we didn't make nonprofits? I mean, this is probably like, you know, what if your sector had no money? Well, if we had all the money in the world, that's different. But I just always think in the long term, like, why do we overcomplicate things for nonprofit organizations? I mean, we expect them to report and to write a significant amount of grants and a significant amount of information for grants. And they just, as they are supporting social service sector and they're the boots on the ground, really holding the opportunity for the city together, we should not require them to sell their soul in order to get money to be beneficial. And so I think that if we look at the long term, the requirements of philanthropy should change. And that's the philanthropy organizations coming together and doing a better job of how do we assist our city and our nonprofit. And I say that from someone in philanthropy. It's hard to continue to expect all that we expect from nonprofits, but to keep up with other philanthropy organizations, you kind of have to. But we have to do better. We have to support our nonprofit partners. We just got to do better.
And of course, some of the onus is federal. I mean, some of it's the requirement of being a 501c3 is the reports and all of that, which, you know, not a whole lot we can do about that, you know, like that, but
could we make it easier in the long term? And can our funding models look differently? So instead of all of the nonprofits going after each individual sector of, so we go to Geins, we go to, you know, James Graham Brown, then we go to Humana, then we go to, could we, you know, and Neville could probably kind of attest to some of his consulting work. What if we just, all the philanthropy organizations sat in and took proposals and did what we call batch funding and said, well, here's what all the nonprofit, you know, all the philanthropy sectors are going to do. And here's what the CDFI, because, you know, Parks the CDFI, here's what the CDFI is going to do in the investment of that capital. And here's what the national organizations can do. And let's actually fund a capital project and an actual investment instead of a nonprofit having to do all of the legwork. Why is the city a nonprofit, like the three-legged stool Ann was talking about? Why couldn't we all come to the table and say, let's review an application differently as a community versus let's send the nonprofit that's already trying to run the social service sector to 900 people and then expect them to survive. We just got to do things better for the people that are serving the people we care about. So we have to design a better system in our city to help the people who are grassroots. That's just my.
So, I mean, are you saying sort of like Fund for the Arts and Community Foundation, but even bigger, citywide, that they just, it's not just about their partners, or it's not just about directed giving, it's about, you know, here's a big pot for the entire city's not-for-profits?
Well, here's a big pot for a particular project that you can present to the group of funders. And let's use Louisville Urban League. That's a phenomenal example. That's a really large project. Wouldn't it have been great for her to come to multiple sectors at the same time and say, let's make this project work for you? Let's say Ann wants to build something amazing for the nonprofit sector. Wouldn't it be great if Ann could come and build a capital project, or Passport with 18th and Broadway, or YMCA that Republic Link had? Like, it is great for us to continue to do revitalization. You know, Deb does amazing work in the immigrant community. She would probably love a second location somewhere. Could we continue to help build capital infrastructure in our communities in one swoop of helping an organization meet the capital investment requirements versus sending them out to 500 different people? I know it's crazy. All y'all are like, whoa.
It's not crazy. This is the kind of, you know, to use a trite phrase, outside the box thinking that's going to move the needle and make us.
But there's cities, there's cities that are doing it. Baltimore's doing it. New York is doing it. There's cities that are doing this kind of collect. San Francisco does it. How do you help a nonprofit that's doing a big capital project get them the funding they need? Because it helps the city. It just helps everybody.
How do they
So-
how do they actually physically manifest the program?
So I think for the
Functional
sake of
budget.
time, we could talk about that offline, but San Francisco, I just visited San Francisco for an economic development, and they are doing this currently, where city, philanthropy, all of them sit in a room, project is proposed, they find the money, like together, collectively as a team. And it's really cool. Like, it's super cool. Because they're
It's a startup approach.
Very
It's a
much
startup
so.
fund.
Absolutely. It's a funding startup approach. Absolutely. It's almost like seed funding. Absolutely. Very much so. Yeah.
Because Keisha, as you were describing this, I was doing something else because like, well, that's nice, but that can't be done. But then when you referenced that it's being done in other cities, it stopped me cold in my multitasking. And so I agree that this is this is a broader conversation. The fact that it's being done elsewhere, yeah, like underline, italics, hold, like, whoa, wait a second.
Yeah, so San Francisco is doing it currently in their Latin community, in which they're trying to salvage because of the cost of real estate. And we just like literally this year I visited them and sat in a room and learned from how they're doing it. Stevie advice, all of that.
I wonder if going back to the
And Alicia's signaling me. We only have 2 minutes left, so I do have to. Sorry.
The midterm immediate, if it's what are the models that are working elsewhere, where is the problem, and just cataloging those instead of trying to invent it here. What can we steal from and adapt?
Well, that actually is our next question. So what's already working that needs doubling down on? So I think that referencing other cities that are doing work in philanthropy and finding capital to build projects. The other thing was, to Teresa's point, using down the data and scoping data. That was something else we talked about. Any other points on 2021 and beyond and doubling down on?
Yeah, when you were talking about this seed and group thing, I would take it the other way, and I don't know how successful the Common App has been for colleges, but especially for smaller, less resourced nonprofits. If there was a common app for grants for philanthropy, even if the decision making wasn't, they're so similar, and we spend so much time adjusting for each grant maker. It could be streamlined, and then each philanthropy still has its own decision-making process. It just cuts down on the infrastructure and investment to really answer the same question.
So Stephen, what that app is oh, okay, you said never mind. It's an app where college students can go and find scholarships that they need, that fit their style and criteria that they would need for minority or academic or. So the last question.
I've got one related, if I could just say, I've got one related to what we've been talking about. When we apply for grants and you really need some money for matching, so I would love to see a revolving fund that you could go into where you've got a tight deadline. You can't go out and fundraise individually, but you need some match money so you can submit a successful application. And I work for Metro. It's almost impossible. I can never get matching money from Metro, so you're then looking at a nonprofit going out and doing fundraising, and the deadlines are not lining up. So a revolving fund to fund matching grants. You get the grant, you put the money back in. You don't get the grant, it goes to someone else.
Right, that's a good point. So Alicia, do we have time for our last question or no?
Yes, we're gonna wrap at 2:19.
Perfect, so we have 3 minutes for our last question. What would you do tomorrow to support the sector if money were no object?
Fund the nonprofit that I'm trying to start myself.
Fund my own nonprofit. Anyone else? So if money were no object and so again, what would you do tomorrow to support the sector if money were no object?
We've mentioned a few things, a pool of money for, the matching grant, the rotating matching grant fund. It's.
So for me, Bennett, mine 100% hands down would be to invest in the way that we change policy and legislation that has everything to do with the effects of brown, Black, and immigrant communities. And I would just say low income communities as a whole in this country. We can continue to do programs and partnerships in in community and nonprofits, because that's what we address in philanthropy, but it's never going to change if the policies of this country don't change. And so I think that advocacy matters. And I think when we continue to push advocacy, that matters. And so if I had an unlimited amount of money, it would be continue to fight to change the policies and the advocacy in this state and in this country that have to directly relate to low income communities from an access point as a whole. That's my opinion. But
and thereby lead towards eliminating the idea that there are low income communities.
Exactly, just equity as a whole. You're absolutely right, Mark. Just equity. I mean, it's for disability, it's for LGBTQ plus. Like, as a city, how can we advance our own population by the policies that continue to hold our nonprofit work back?
Right.
I mean, redlining, housing, transportation, healthcare access. Every person on this call deals with some type of policy issue in your work as nonprofit sector. And so if we could advance our city and had money.
Zero interest mortgages, zero interest business loans. I know I live in Portland, and my landlord has no interest in being a landlord. He wants to rent you your apartment at low rates to the point where you can then buy it. You know, he wants to increase equity in the neighborhood. And that's how people in the United States traditionally gained wealth, was by owning property. And, you know, the low income and communities of color have been redlined for, you know, centuries, and they have not been able, by and large, to get mortgages or to buy property to increase their family inherited wealth. And so redressing that fundamental block to communities of color gaining equity and building wealth in this country is the only way we're going to move forward with these things, is permanent, long-lasting economic change and enabling people to own property rather than just rent things.
I agree. Wealth creation. Is there anyone else that I'd love to hear more about that particular question? Any other, if you had a magic wand, unlimited money?
It's a magic wand to help get to unlimited money, and I'm not kidding. Amending Section 181 of Kentucky's state constitution.
Okay.
Which prohibits municipalities from having a local sales tax.
Right. Well,
I feel like we got to balance that back. You've got to be able to create some other sources of funding for projects that can leverage private funding. We're too tilted now to one source, it seems like to me.
It's super preliminary. There is an effort that is started to build a statewide coalition to embrace that effort under the auspices of a quality of life, quality of place conversation. Super preliminary, but one is happening.
I'd also just like to throw in too that, Mark, I like some of the things that you were saying around helping people build equity. And I'd like to see universal design concepts being used whenever we're talking about equity, because just as an example, if you look at affordable housing in Louisville that is accessible, if you were to try to make a Venn diagram, you would practically have just 2 circles on a page.
Stephen, you said universal design standards. I might have misunderstood the.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. And my connection, for whatever reason, just kind of went a little wonky. So I'm sorry. Could you ask me again?
Just
one more time?
can you encapsulate that one more time so I can take the note?
Yeah. I just said whenever we're talking about helping people build equity, utilizing universal design concepts so that these things are accessible to more people. And I just use the example of in Louisville, when we look at affordable housing, if we have a Venn diagram of 2 circles that are affordable housing and accessible housing, you pretty much just have 2 circles on a page. and they don't overlap.
Y'all, I'm going to have to close our room. I'm not sure if it's going to give us a 1-minute warning or if it's going to take us out automatically, but I just wanted to give you a warning.
Okay, well, guys, thanks so much for everything. Bennett and Deb, if you want to tag team on the report out, since I know Bennett took the notes, and if anyone wanted to, I don't know how the report out will work, but thanks so much, everybody. I really appreciate all your feedback. And I saw you taking a ton of notes, so I know that you got,
I can't read my own writing, but so it won't really help us, but that's okay.
We have 47 seconds. Will this room that we have here, do we have a idea or record of who was in it? So maybe we could continue sort of spitballing offline.
I have a recording. The whole session's been recorded today, so that should tell us. And I think you do have to click return to the main session. Do y'all have a box about that?
And we can do like maybe a little mailing list or something. Okay, great.
Good job, Keisha.
Thanks.
This is all our group. Maybe the other groups.
Yeah, because we're late.
It didn't work, did it?
Well, Ashley told me to do 222 after I had said 219. So.
Oh,
good.
I think we're all on.
I don't know if you all can see me. Okay, here I am. All right. Thank you all for participating in this breakouts. Hopefully you all had great discussions. I know that we did. We're coming up to the close of the meeting, but I want us to do like a 1 to 2 minute just report out of the information that you heard in your group and things you think need to be lifted up. So I'm going to start with my group. I am not the reporter. Denise is the reporter. Denise, can you give an update? Okay.
So in answer to question number 1, what was the greatest desire? The key points were wanting to see greater partnership and collaboration, an increased recognition of the role that nonprofits play in our community, in our economy, in our social structure, and to drive sustainability of funding models. We all recognize that we tend to see there's an issue, a lot of funds go into it, and then another issue comes up, and funding can then be diverted away. As far as action steps, what we wanted to see over the next either 6 months or 12 months, we really didn't distinguish, was 1, understanding what funders are looking for, because that will help bring partners together if they understand what some of the objectives, the funding objectives are. We'd like to see increased access to capital. We did discuss that the private donors are the primary driving force behind fundraising. And that did lead to the question of, does our community have the capacity to support the number of nonprofits in our community? And if money were no object, there was a great comment about increased awareness of the programs. Really what they were talking about was marketing, so that there was some place that nonprofits could go to see, or individuals in the community, what programs and services are available. And greater transparency and open communication in cross-organizational collaboration. And that's the end of the report. Let me know if I missed anything, Ashley.
No, I think that's good. Thank you. All right, group number 2, Keisha, who was your reporter from your group? Or are you?
Well, I was group number 4, so you still want me to just go in place of group number 2?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, no order. We're just getting it out there.
All right. So Bennett is our scriber, and he's gonna report in partnership with Deb, since they were kind of taking notes together.
Just run through a few highlights. So big concept was trying to make sure we play nicer together, that there's some areas of philanthropy where folks are kind of siloed, and it'd be great if they would come together. The arts community was mentioned, parks was also mentioned. An idea that some concepts that came out of that might be would be to look at some merger across some of these sectors to be more efficient. Talked about developing shared language around issues, particularly trying to tie those maybe to some bigger, the drivers through the Greater Louisville Project was one. There was a big discussion on how we should look at our philanthropic assets and assess those. so that we can have better coordination. And along that line was, looking, not quite, trying to look nationally too, so we can really kind of sell some of the assets that we have to be able to bring in more national support. That was a comment. We talked a bit about assessing the diversity and the community involvement that we have in the nonprofit sector, the donor community, and actually analyzing that and reporting on it, so that in the longer term we can develop ways to actually improve that. Let's set a baseline and let's move from there. Deb, I want to let you chime in if you would like. We talked about some of the big picture items, was how can we grow the pie in terms of funding. Suggestion to let us do a local option sales tax. Let's look at the state legislation that would allow us to do that, so we can expand the pie of what's available in the community. Talked about some ideas of pooling money. So can we create a pool that would allow us to have a matching funds for grants, so we can act more nimbly? And also one of the big issues was, could we develop a pool of funding where a nonprofit could develop an infrastructure project by going to a fund that's pooled resources, and let nonprofit donors work together to fund a large project all at once, with the project that Sadiqa has was a good example that would have benefited from that. So that's what I have.
All right. Anything else from this group? All right. I'm going to move on to the next group.
Ashley, just real quick to clarify. So one thing to just point out is when we talked about the nonprofit sector, about looking at how much minority, diversity, Black, Brown, immigrant, LGBTQ+ sat on the boards and leaderships of these nonprofit. It was also philanthropic organizations as well. So I want to make sure we capture that. We need to do an assessment in the 6-month term on how much diversity is really leading our organizations and boards that have the power to make decisions invested in our city as social infrastructure. And so I know that bylaws are stated, and so we can't change bylaws, but can we make a true understanding of the shift? And so that goes into 2021 and beyond, is can we shift to know that there is minority representation on all of these committees long term? And so I want to make sure philanthropic organizations are added to that. It's not just nonprofit, it's philanthropy as well.
That's perfect. That's good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. I'm going to turn it to Alice's group.
No, I'm kidding. We're all fantastic, but we had a fantastic scribe. So Antigona is going to tell our group's feedback.
Yes, like all of you guys, it must be because great minds think alike, right? We really had similar ideas, but it really came down to putting something in paper and creating a strategic plan in 6 months, and have clarity of what needs to be done, whether it's the treatment of people in the nonprofit sector, to being part of the solution, and being inclusive. That word came out a lot in our conversation, and really it allowed us to find ways where we need to work, and that is, again, having whether it's in entering a board membership as a minority, to really becoming more a unit and cohesiveness between organizations that serves the same audience, and coming together. We've talked about how Louisville is becoming a silo in terms of nonprofit sector, and just doing the work on their own because everyone is doing the best that they could. However, we are really failing to see that when we come together, we can actually reach a bigger audience, and we haven't done so. And so I think that became the biggest challenge, is how it's becoming us versus them, and we're really not sharing the resources. And it goes back to whether it's getting attention from a national grant, a foundation to get those big grants. And I think we're missing that. We're the only state or city that we don't see those big grants from big organizations come into the city, because everyone wants to do it themselves, and then we often fail as a result. So really that was the biggest thing that I think we got off, is that just coming together and setting up a strategic plan in 6 months to ensure that, we will do something about it, rather than just talking about it.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you. Okay, last group. I think we have a last group. Yep, Ramona.
Yes, and I don't think I'm on mute. Yes, so we talked about a lot of things, but I think one of our, I want to summarize what I think our greatest desire was, and I think that came up when we really ran out of time to talk about what we wanted to double down on. But I think our greatest desire is to end philanthropic redlining, and to do that by really getting the funds to the communities where they're needed the most. And we do that through equitable evaluation tools and providing access to those types of tools, so we can really be able to see which organizations are reaching their goals, their impact goals, but doing that in an equitable way. In the next 6 months, we think it's important to have some sort of database where nonprofits can be able to list identified needs, and it also can be a way for potential funders or donors to be able to see how they can match those needs. And in the next 2021, after moving forward, I think it's really important that we build the capacity of nonprofit organizations so they are not dependent on outside funding from either government or private sources. And how do we help organizations to build that capacity and put systems in place so they are sustainable without being dependent on those sources. I invite anyone else in our group to add to that if I did not adequately cover some of our discussion. Sounds like I might have got it.
I agree. Okay, well, thank you all. This is very helpful. We're capturing these notes and we are over time. So next steps that I want to throw out some next steps. Some of you may have some recommended next steps as well, but thank you all for participating. So we're going to use this feedback, and we're going to share it definitely with the CAN group that will be convening in the next month or so. We'll also compile all the information that we've gotten from you all today and make sure to share that back out. I may be reaching out to some of you individually or in smaller groups so we can dig a little bit deeper on what was discussed today. Because I don't want to lose momentum that was had during these conversations. So I feel like we need to keep that going. This is really, really, really critical timing. And then we're going to figure out the best steps in terms of, because some of you said in 6 months we need to have a strategic plan, or by 2021, we really need to think about how we need to collectively develop a more nonprofit collaborative. So we don't have those answers. And so I think that's why we need to keep having conversations around what makes sense for our community together. So we'll follow up, and we'll set another meeting in the next month or so. So keep a lookout for that. If there's others, and I think there are many others that need to be a part of this conversation, please push out the link and get them signed up, or connect them to me and we can make sure they can get signed up. Anything else on the close, Vincent, Ann, or others?
No,
I'm good. I think we had a great opportunity to hear from some great people and being able to take some action.
All right. Okay. Thank you all. We'll be in touch. Expect to hear from us very soon. Okay.
Thank you.
you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks.